Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Packaging Europe podcast. My name is Elisabeth Skura. So when I attended HISPAC last year in Barcelona, I listened to an interesting talk about a reusable packaging collaboration between Tomra and the municipality of Aarhus in Denmark. So Tomra has signed a collaboration agreement with Aarhus municipality for a 3-year trial in the city centre of Aarhus, which will initially focus on takeaway cups, and there are plans to expand this to takeaway packaging further down the line as well. The trial started in January 2024, and we're now a year into the project. To find out more, I sat down with Geir, who is Tomra's Senior Vice President and Head of Tomra Reuse. And we talked about the project in a bit more in depth and also discussed scalability and future plans and how this all ties in with the packaging industry's striving to reduce waste and become more sustainable. So if that's something that sounds of interest to you, just keep on listening. Welcome, Geir. Thank you very much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth. Thank you for having me here.
You're very welcome. I wanted to start with a broad question, and I wanted to know how would you summarize the benefits of a reusable system for takeaway packaging compared to single-use solutions that are currently out there on the market?
Yeah, it's an important question. So I would say the benefits comes in maybe 3 different groups. First of all, we are talking about the greenhouse gas emissions. Then we are looking into material consumption reduction, and then it's a littering aspect. So starting with the first, we actually engaged Eunomia to do some research on this. Of course, I made some assumptions, made some simulations, and concluded that if today's disposable takeaway packaging in the city of Aarhus is replaced by reusable packaging, one is looking into 54% savings. And then they also estimated that in Aarhus, you would see an 87% reduction in packaging materials used for takeaway food and drinks. So that's important contributions. And of course, when you have a system where we have a return incentive for returning the packaging, the littering problem related to takeaway packaging today will be significantly reduced, if not eliminated. So that's 3 main contributions. In addition, you could also say that, such a solution would contribute to reaching targets in the packaging waste regulation for reducing packaging in general. And probably you could also argue that consumers will have a benefit coming from a higher quality of packaging, again, for food and drinks. So that, I think, summarizes the benefits.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I wanted to zoom in a bit on this particular project and ask you about some of the key features on this new reusable takeaway packaging pilot and find out a bit more about how it works.
Let me start with the business or vendor perspective. So I would argue that the system we have introduced in Aarhus has a maximized convenience for cafes, for restaurants, for the businesses. Why? First of all, there is no manual take-back of used packaging over the counter. It's automated using automated collection points. Also, there is no local sanitization and quality inspection for the local businesses because that's done centrally. There is no extra equipment needed in the cafe, in the restaurant. And there are new routines when it comes to selling, handling food and drinks, except from the fact that the business has to order the reusable packaging from a new web shop instead of the previous web shop where they ordered disposable packaging. So that was the business vendor perspective. Then I will also argue that we have maximized convenience for the consumers. Why? Partly because we have collection points in public space, which are open 24/7. So hence, you don't need to go back to a partner restaurant to return your packaging. So we know that in some other reuse systems, you have to go back to the restaurant where you got the packaging, or at least another partner in the same network of restaurants, the same chain. That's not the case here. So what we have put in place is what we call an open system, which is really a shared infrastructure, which accepts packaging from several packaging pools, again, for maximizing consumer convenience. Also, we are aware that quite a few reuse-based systems use apps, basically to link packaging to person. And we have implemented a system where you don't need any app. So you don't need to identify yourself. You simply tap to tap to receive the return incentive if a deposit is used as a return incentive. And this solution also then works for international consumers, so tourists, which is a benefit. Yet other reuse systems, are based on consumers bringing their own personal packaging. And again, that's not required here. So I think we have succeeded quite well in maximizing convenience both for consumers and vendors. Also, a key feature is that the system we have here in Aarhus is scalable. Again, coming to the fact that we have automated collection solutions, we don't think it's scalable to take back reusable packaging over the counter. It's okay if you have a few packages per day, but it's not okay if you have several hundreds or thousand packages per day. Also, we know that quite a few reuse schemes today are based on local sanitization in the cafe, in the restaurant, and quality assurance. In Aarhus, we have centralized that function, again, for making it. So yet another key feature is that the system is very transparent and has a high system integrity. What I mean by that is the system in Aarhus, you can actually very accurately report on the environmental impact because you know exactly how many times packaging has traveled through the system. And that really decides the main environmental contribution. By having a high system integrity, I also mean that the system cannot be cheated, for example, in relation to payout of deposits. And all this is facilitated through serialized packaging. So each packaging is unique, has its own serial number. And the last key feature I would like to mention is the fact that in our system, any littered packaging, if you litter a reusable packaging, anyone can bend down, pick up that packaging and cash in the return incentive. We think that's an important principle, which we have brought from other more well-known deposit return schemes.
Obviously, setting up such a system is very challenging, I'd imagine. What have been some of the hurdles you had to overcome to implement this system?
Yeah, I would say it has been a hurdle or a challenge to, design to maximize the convenience, which we think is so important both for consumers and businesses, basically for all involved parties, taking into account the complexity of such a reuse system. In general, a reuse system is a lot more complex than a recycling-based system. So that has been a key challenge. Another key challenge has been to motivate vendors to achieve a significant or satisfactory market share of reusable packaging. That is a challenge. And tied to that, to find a viable business model, which we have not succeeded with in Aarhus yet. The Aarhus system is a system which is subsidized, partly by Aarhus municipality and partly by Tomra. So that's some of the key challenges we have been facing.
And how have you addressed these challenges that have arisen?
Yeah. So we have been pretty clear that, if you take into account, if you're honest, or if you should be honest, I think any reuse system is a little bit more inconvenient and a little bit more costly than a system based on disposable single-use packaging. So unless we have regulations, interventions, incentives, disincentivizing disposable packaging and incentivizing reusable packaging, we don't think we will ever end up with a future where reusable packaging is the norm and where we see a profitable business model around reusable packaging. So we have been pretty clear that we need political interventions, regulations to make this happen. Unfortunately, I have to say.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe with the packaging and packaging waste regulation now being implemented, maybe this will boost these kind of projects, or there'll be more of an interest in them.
Yeah, and we do see partly at EU level, but also at individual country level and even city level, that reusable packaging is incentivized to solve problems. Of course, we would like to see more Central European regulations, which are stronger. But I think if you look back a little bit and look at what's happened, the trend is pretty clear. The trend moving, incentivizing reusable over disposable packaging.
What motivated Tomra to introduce this initiative in Aarhus in particular?
Yeah, I would say that's four main things. First of all, Tomra has a vision of leading the resource evolution. We want to be a thought and impact leader, basically to be a market maker, not so much a market taker. Secondly, reuse has a position in the waste hierarchy above recycling. So I think based on our legacy, based on who Tomra is, we should do more to provide the most attractive solutions based on reusable packaging. And the third motivation is, purely the reusable packaging obvious role in the circular economy. I mean, obviously, it is a key contributor to a circular economy. And lastly, as I already alluded to, there is a pretty clear societal and regulatory trend where disposable packaging is being disincentivized. And then we need a replacement, which that most likely is reusable packaging. So those are the main four drivers for why we decided to establish Tomra Reuse and put a significant effort into this.
Obviously, the pilot is meant to go on for 3 years. What are your key takeaways after almost 1 year of running it?
Yeah, then I would say the system is perceived as attractive by most consumers and vendors, as well as the Aarhus city staff. They're very happy with the system. So that's one learning. A second learning is that cafes, businesses, vendors, yes, they do like sustainable solutions, but only if their profit is not negatively affected. So they are very, cost / profit sensitive, which is not a big surprise. A third learning is that, and this mainly comes from the Festuge and the party week they had in Aarhus now first week of September, where we turned around approximately 100,000 cups in a week's time, which basically was a stress test for the system. And I would say the system passed the test. So we have basically confirmed that our city solution is scalable. And the fourth learning, I would say, is that incentives are required to trigger a significant shift from disposable to reusable packaging. Yes, we are struggling with the market share, particularly where the vendors offer both disposable and reusable packaging in parallel. Some vendors have completely switched from disposable to reusable packaging, and there we have a market share which is very close to 100%. But that's still the exception. It's not the norm in Aarhus. So that's the four learnings I would like to highlight.
Do you have any idea or any thoughts yet on what is going to happen after those 3 years? Do you have hopes of continuing with it, or is it maybe too soon to say?
I think if nothing changes in Denmark, meaning we do not get any regulations incentivizing reusable packaging, and assuming the city, the municipality, will not contribute significantly to the operation of the pilot, I'm afraid the pilot will be shut down after the contract period is over. And I can also share that we have been contacted by other cities which have studied the system in Aarhus and concluded that they would also like to have the same or a similar system. So clearly there is a wish for these kind of systems in other cities. But I think a prerequisite that for us being able to deploy, roll out similar system is that there is some kind of incentives promoting reusable packaging, basically creating a business model around reusable packaging.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about scaling up in a little while, but I also wanted to ask about how to incentivize customers to use the packaging and also to return the packaging, as obviously with takeaway drinks and also food, convenience really is key, isn't it?
I think, first of all, we have to maximize the consumer convenience. Although we can never beat the convenience of disposable packaging, but at least we should minimize the inconvenience factor. So that's important. Then I think we should maximize also the consumption, the eating, drinking, consumption experience, by harnessing the positive potential in reusable packaging, which is more sturdy, keeps the food warm for longer or cold for longer. That's important. Then I think it's also important to share knowledge about the system and its positive impacts. And then what we have learned is that if vendors, if cafes, restaurants make it default, make reuse the default offering, then that's very efficient when it comes to achieving higher market penetrations. So that's also a very useful tool. But ideally, we were able to end up with a system where it was cheaper to have your coffee or food served in a reusable package than if you had it served in a disposable package. So hence, to provide a financial incentive, I think that would be the ideal scenario to trigger shift.
Coming back to the topic of scaling up, are there any concrete plans to expand this project beyond Aarhus, both within Denmark and also in other countries? And generally wanted to hear your thoughts about how this could be done.
As I already mentioned, scaling of a city solution like this is totally dependent on political interventions, incentives, regulations, like maybe bans for certain selected disposable packaging. And we see that is happening in some countries, or a tax levy for selected disposable packaging, or let's say a subsidy for reusable packaging. So that's the key enabler we see for scaling these kind of solutions. So as I alluded to, we see different regulations in different countries, some better than others. So obviously we are following up in those geographies where we see the best framework for a reusable packaging system. So let's see how that progresses.
Yeah, fingers crossed it will become a lot more commonplace in the future and maybe even the norm and not the exception. I wanted to ask you, how do you think a shift to reusable packaging systems could change consumer behavior in the long run? And what role do companies like Tomra play in driving that shift towards more reusable packaging?
I think long-term, incentivized reusable packaging system will change the consumer behavior, similar to how deposit return schemes have changed the consumer behavior in the field of beverage packaging, so cans and bottles. After some time, after DRS is introduced, the new behaviors are becoming the norm, and the old behaviors, like tossing the the can and the PET bottle in the garbage bin really feels totally outdated and irresponsible. I'm feeling when I'm on vacation, in some countries, then it feels odd not to return the can and the PET bottle to deposit return scheme, where we know it's being recycled and really taken care of. And I think I foresee a similar change in behavior and now for takeaway packaging, reusable packaging. And I think companies like Tomra play a key role in developing and providing the most attractive solutions, contributing to enabling this shift together with required political interventions, which I mentioned several times in this talk.
Absolutely, yeah. It sounds like there's still some work to be done also from the government's or regulatory side. So it will be very interesting to see what happens and watch this space. So that brings us to the end of our conversation today and just leaves me to say thank you very much, Geir, for talking to me on this podcast today and for sharing your insights and expertise.
That was just a pleasure. Thank you so much, listeners, for having me here, and thanks for listening in.
Yes, thank you very much. Likewise. And quick reminder to our audience, as always, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes. And thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.